Hey, so it's still October 31st, and I thought it was important to get the full introductory piece out of the way before this nonsensical election that's going to happen. Politics won't fix what's wrong, but it sure will be a catalyst for what's coming. So I want you to understand, you know, looking back from 20 years from now, what was the state of the world and what was the truth um, that justified the transformation, the reset, the, um, the changing of how everything has always been, essentially. The truth is, you know, truth is, I make notes, right? Because I'll just ramble. The truth is, we have an ineffective and corrupt government and a two-party system that's really not a choice. I mean, one party at this point advocates what is outright evil, and the other one is just corrupt and ineffective. And many members of that party are really on board with what is evil, and so there's no choice, not really. Um, and even if a man were to be elected that thought and saw the world as it really is pretty unlikely he's going to make a big difference. Um, Economically, we're essentially ruled by crony capitalism. And me, I'm a big advocate of free market capitalism, but what we have is not free market capitalism, not even close. And in your box of books, there's some stuff by Thomas Sowell, brilliant economist, and we'll explain what we've done wrong with Adam Smith's conception of capitalism and free market capitalism. So what we have is crony capitalism, corporations that are way too big, bigger than government in some instances, more control, and then a population that's just eaten up with avarice, sloth, and ignorance, willful or otherwise. Look, since the 1960s, you could say since the 1930s, you could say since the 1860s, since the 1790s, and there's papers that discuss all of that. What was true about history and how all of this has been a slippery slope. Slippery slopes really exist. But let's just say since the 1960s, in the current era, we've been told there's numerous crises that have to be solved by the government, and it's often the same people with the same solutions to different problems. And that's telling because it's brought us to what we're about to enter. But we were told in the 60s, racial injustice required a massive social program. We're told in 1972, we're told that the Earth was cooling down. Global cooling was going to destroy us. And then science changed their mind and said, well, it was global warming. Well, then facts came out that maybe it's not global warming. We're not really warming up. So we settled on climate change. Now we have a 12-year-old Scandinavian girl that runs around the world and tells us how we ought to live. But it's the same people, the same solutions, different problems, which is fairly interesting. And then in 2020, for the first time in human history, we get a virus, there's a pandemic, and we shut down the economies. We throw out immediately ancient rights, civil rights, human rights, all of that. Same people, same solutions, different problems. Very telling. Well, in 1964, the Great Society ended up destroying the black family, and in black neighborhoods, you ended up with fatherless families. You ended up with crime, which, and then in the 1980s, we decided we needed another solution. So war on drugs, which led to some pretty aggressive police tactics, militarization of the police. So one government solution, one solution by these people begat another problem, which begat another solution. But it all moved down the line toward, more problems and more government. But I think it's important to take away that it's always the same solution. More government solutions somehow. And I'll provide, in the papers and the books and letters that I'll write to you and put in the box, more explanation of the origins of some of these ideas. Not worthy to get into that in an introductory video, but just understand none of this came from nothing. There's ideas, there's political philosophy, flawed philosophies, flawed worldviews that back all this up. And if you put it in a nutshell, basically people have been trying to perfect the idea of communitarianism and socialism, communism, meshing that with corporatism, and perfect all of that in a way that, well, it benefits them, but notionally it benefits us all. Even though that every time those things have been tried in mass and on at scale, they've failed and they've actually cost millions and millions of lives, which is true. And maybe you're not taught that by the time you see this. Maybe the communist revolution, which becomes corporatism or whatever you call it at this point in the future, some sort of authoritarianism, centralization, and communitarianism, it's always failed. So those that have screamed loudest for this have been pretty bold in their proclamations as of late. And some people say, well, they're bold because they're going to lose. They're now nervous. I think they're bold because they're brazen because they know they're winning and they know they can't be stopped. So the Great Reset, the elimination of our current economic system, Bretton Woods 3, whatever you want to call it, the introduction of a new currency, a new digital currency, that is they made videos, proclaiming the benefits of that as early as 2014 and put them in the public. Not afraid of this, not afraid to tell people, because they know most people are too cowardly, too ignorant, too comfortable to do anything about it. So the open deception in politics and the media, where they tell you that what you see with your eyes is not true, it's gaslighting, but it's just bold and it's audacious. Look, you never have to be afraid to see what you see, right? Don't be afraid to see what you see. Don't let people tell you don't see what you see. And then, the notion of projecting one's own crimes and one's own flaws onto your opposition. There was a book written in the early 1970s by a guy named Saul Alinsky, who dedicated his book to Lucifer. Rules for Radicals, that's in your box. You need to understand part of the history of it. But this projection bit was one of the tactics that he favored and taught. So, but that is just a sign of winning, I think. That you're so bold that you can do things that the common sense and observation tells other people is wrong and not right, but you do it in the open. You are convinced you're winning. So here's some facts about things before the reset. Look, we had small businesses, family-owned businesses, small mom and pop shops. You could go to a hardware store that wasn't part of its chain, wasn't part of a corporation, restaurants that were independent. So we had freedom, responsibility, and choice. You could start your own business and compete in the global marketplace. There was risk, there was reward, there was freedom. But we've seen in 2020 the very beginnings of an active effort to eliminate small business, because it represents those things: freedom, responsibility, and choice. At the same time, the government started pulling back the money supply. We saw draconian restrictions on businesses operating while major corporations just down the street were allowed to operate. This was not by accident, and it wasn't. It's part of the Great Reset, and they've told us this. It's easily accessible information. But understand that we were there, right? That people had that freedom to do those things. We've got major corporations, and they're growing, and they will only continue to grow. Some of them hold as much power as some governments, and they're all influenced by multiple governments. But with corporations, you end up with less choice, really. And if an airline tells you, even in 2020, that you can't fly with them, we only have two other options. And there's not a lot of flights to a lot of cities. It doesn't take a lot for a corporation to massively impact your life, even now. And it's ultimately possible and probable and likely and almost assured that this will continue, the partnership between the corporations and the government, in a very loose way, and a corporatism sort of communitarianism. I mean, culturally, we're lazy. We're not creative. We lack curiosity to question the world around us, and we're essentially divorced from the truth as a people. That's Cooper. That was Ashby's dog. He lived with Ashby for a bit, and Ashby was in an apartment. He came to live with me. Long story, but he's my best buddy now. That's Cooper barking over there. Economically, look, government solutions created a lot of the problems that we have, and if you add that to our laziness and our avarice, our sloth, our ignorance, we have division and inequality, and that is an absolute true fact. Some of that is encouraged by government programs that allow people to not have to be industrious. Other parts of that is created by the discouragement of the system, which makes people look around and see nothing but hopelessness, and they don't try. And these are true things. It's still true that any person with the capability and the desire can raise themselves to almost any level. It's not true that everybody has the same chance, and we've made it a very racial thing this year. Since 2014, we brought racism back as a sexy thing in politics, as a way to divide people. But it's not racist. It may be predominantly in some races, but it's not racist. It's a problem of the economic system. It's a problem of us. That's Leo, small dog. Leo. We're very warlike. We've been warlike since 1812. Militarism in the police is a problem, and it's not a problem. Leo. And politics is absolutely not an answer to this. It can delay it. But as long as the people are so confused and so out of touch with a proper worldview, there's no political solution, no matter who is elected. Most people are just more interested in pop culture and sports and entertainment and trivialities and bread and circuses than they are in important things and asking important questions. So we are very flawed. We're also very free, and if a person wants to see the world as it is, and if a person wants to work hard, and if they want to persevere and overcome, we have that capability. And we have the capability and the opportunity to fail or succeed, to make of whatever circumstances life has given us something else. So it's not a perfect system. We're very flawed. But primarily we got here because we, as humans are flawed, and we were so easily deceived. Now, I mean, the solution at this point that's being offered to us is a new currency, which will soon be offered to us, a new currency. More control, less choice, control of your thoughts and your actions, and limitation of your opportunities, essentially. And by the time you are coming into your early 20s, this will be your reality. Behind it, I mean, it's not a global conspiracy in terms of people having a board meeting, although that may happen. It's just opportunity. It's a conspiracy of opportunity powered by evil that manipulates people toward this. But as bad as things are, and as dumb as we are, we're still free to think, speak, worship, and determine our own fate. So it's not a terrible world. It's not a dark world. It just could be better, but we understand, if you're a realist, understands, a Christian realist understands that this is the fate of humans. We were always going to mess things up. So the big lies that brought us here, and there's truth in all lies, but the cops are out hunting and killing black folks, and that's been part of the division in 2020. There's a problem with violence. There's a problem with crime, a problem with drugs, but the truth of it is that it's not a racist thing. It just predominantly happens in more crime-ridden neighborhoods. I myself would be wary. I'm always wary of interactions with the cops. Not that the cops are bad folks. They have a tough job in a tough world where there's bad people, and there is no easy solution to that. The war on drugs was a terrible thing. Drugs being rampant in a society are a terrible thing. So there's no easy solution in an evil world with flawed men, flawed humans. Every public policy solution has public policy ramifications. The virus that we've destroyed entire economies over this year was just not that deadly. It just wasn't that deadly. And I don't care how long they carry this on and how long they have to use this to achieve the ends that people have for 40 years and longer had in mind. This virus was just not that deadly. It's contagious. People die from it. But listen, don't believe anything else. It wasn't that deadly. The climate science is just not settled on that thing. Cooling, warming, change, right? So they don't know. They don't know. But what has happened is they took the people that pushed a political agenda through these climate policies took environmental issues and politicized them, where a guy like me would say, we should have more forests and we should protect things and we should be conserve as you use, and they made it a very political thing to achieve a goal, an end. More government is the answer. Is this one of the big lies? And we see time and time again throughout human history that is not the case, and especially in our last 100 years, we see that the cost of that is pretty high. But that's not going to stop them. Look, this was all prophesied. It's all in the Bible, right? From the technology that's becoming available and things that I can only imagine what quantum computing is going to do to the world, to the system of trade and control, all prophesied. So it was supposed to be this way, and there was no stopping it, and that's okay. That's okay. This is the time in the world that we live in. This is the time in the world that you live in. It's very sad that it was to watch it happen. To watch the color revolution happen in 2020, and to watch so many people fall into deception and stupidity as they listen to morons on the television that are lying to them, and then they repeat the lies, and they sit back, stand by, and aid in this thing coming. People that should know better. At least it would be encouraging to see more people stand up and say, my gosh, this is not right. But it's supposed to be this way. And because it's supposed to be this way doesn't mean that the world that you're going to live in is good and that it's okay. If you don't believe what I will say to you and what I've said to you and what I will say to you in more detail about the God of the Bible, read the prophets. Start with the prophecies first, and then look at your world and compare the two, and realize that the economic system and the control, the technology was all there, and it's all talked about 2,000, 3,000 years ago, depending upon the book. And then assess what I tell you about the God of the Bible. Look, man's flawed. It was supposed to be like this, and that's the takeaway. We stumbled into this in 2020. and there's no stumbling out of it, even if unless God were to decide that this is not the time. But anyway, I love you, and I'll talk later.